Welcome back to this Teach Out on Impeachment. We're back today with Ken Coleman, who's a professor of political science, as well as the director of the Center for Political Studies here at the University of Michigan. Thanks for coming back again and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the history of impeachment within the U.S. and kind of thinking through what are the nuances that we can learn for this current context. So you can start out with the question of, is there any notable takeaways that our participants should be thinking about when comparing the process of the potential impeachment of President Trump with that of other presidents?
Yeah, the two most recent instances were Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton. And Richard Nixon's the impeachment vote never ended up happening. He resigned prior, but certainly the process was begun, and it was quite inevitable that he would be impeached. And then Bill Clinton, of course, was impeached, but then survived staying in office and was not removed. The differences, I think, are deep. We're in a much more polarized partisan environment right now, where even the very process by which people are undergoing the impeachment inquiry and whether there should be a vote, whether there should be investigations, whether people should testify, should the executive officers honor the subpoenas. All of those things get at the very fabric of the process and whether there's legitimacy in the process. I think those were largely absent from the prior two more recent impeachment episodes. Certainly with Nixon and Clinton, I don't think there was a lot of debate about the legitimacy of the process and whether people should cooperate with Congress in the investigations. I think much more about, certainly in Clinton's case, it was much more about whether what he did was in fact impeachable. There wasn't much debate. Well, there wasn't much debate about whether what he did was wrong.
Sure.
It was, or even illegal. It was really about whether it merited impeachment. And in Nixon's case, clearly a crime had been committed, and also there was quite a bit of consensus that he abused the office. But again, few people were questioning the process itself. But we're in a different world here, where the partisan differences are so stark that people are questioning even the process itself. They're questioning whether some people are saying this is an illegitimate, illegal impeachment process, which kind of goes very deep into the entire constitutional system, and whether that has merit in this particular instance. So we're different. We're in a different time and an unusual time that it's hard to predict how it's going to go here.
So it sounds like there's been a lot of different forms of political pressure over the past examples that we've seen historically. So thinking about today's reality and maybe even past examples, what role does the media play in all of this and how the story is told and how information is consumed?
Well, that's another thing that's different about the past. I think in the media environment is itself also polarized and a bit more focused on niche ideological audiences, and the divisions within the media environment fuel the popular polarization, and that's having a major effect. We see some where it kind of tracks where the members of Congress are. So even the divisions within the Republican Party over the impeachment tend to get reflected in the conservative media, the disagreements within the conservative media. Originally, the Democrats had a question in the House, had a question about whether to pursue impeachment in the inquiry. So there was a bit of kind of slow process by which Democrats got on board the impeachment process, the inquiry. Even the sort of more liberal media outlets tended to have some of that same ambiguity. Mm-hmm. But now that, in general, the Democrats in the House are full-fledged in this, they're they're on the train, and it's going fast, and there are few people left behind in the Democratic Party. Everybody's on this. Even the presidential candidates are all jumping on board, even the more moderate presidential candidates. You see the liberal media sort of converge as well. So I think there's a real interplay between what happens within the political parties on the Capitol Hill and what happens in the media environment. And cause and effect is tricky there, but they do tend to work in sync. And that's different. You know, in the early 1970s, when Richard Nixon was threatened with impeachment, there wasn't this hyper-partisan media. It just wasn't.
Sure.
Any partisan media had a very small audience. Almost everybody in the country read, their town newspaper and watched, one of the three major networks for news. And so there wasn't this kind of hyper-partisan media the way there is now.
So we have to think about implications, right? So we have to look back and think through what were the implications of these previous impeachment proceedings and what might be the implications moving forward. Any thoughts to share on those fronts?
That's really hard to predict. There are obviously, both parties are making decisions, taking strategies as they enter the 2020 election year. And they're making bets, if you will. After the Nixon impeachment process, the Republicans took a major hit in elections for Congress, in 1974 in particular. They really got slaughtered. The Democrats made major gains in both the Senate and the House, and a lot of incumbents lost their seats. The Clinton impeachment was a little different. It was towards the end of his term. It's hard to know the impact that had on, let's say, the 2000 election, and even the midterms in '98. But I think his approval ratings never really dipped very much after the impeachment, and there was a sense in which, he as a president didn't suffer in popularity too much from that impeachment process. In fact, it emboldened a lot of his supporters. And I think someone like Donald Trump takes solace in the Clinton experience.
Sure.
And thinks, that this might embolden Trump's supporters. It certainly will some of them. The question is how many, and will he lose more people than he gains in this?
Great. Well, thanks for helping us unpack some of the history here and think through some of the potential implications.
All right. You're welcome.
All right. And thank you for joining us in this segment of the Teach Out. We look forward to continuing the discussion about impeachment elsewhere.